Welcome to another episode of One Take, a video series where I explore the future of work, life, education, and culture with experts and friends from all over. Today's topic is change management. I am fascinated by this topic, and I know you will be too. In this episode, I'm joined by not one, but two insightful guests. I speak with Russ Katzman, who is a grizzled organizational change management practitioner, and thought leader and ProSci Chief Innovation Officer Tim Creasy, who joins us via dial-in from his office in Boise, Idaho. Listen in as we discuss Russ and Tim's experiences helping build effective change capabilities. And hear us explore how the froth and fervor around digital transformation is often getting stuck because folks are fascinated by digital and therefore fail to invest in transformation. Things like change management. Join me. I think you'll find this one extremely interesting. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to One Take. I am thrilled to share with you this next One Take episode in which we are experimenting with lots of different new things. So first and foremost, we have not one but two guests for the price of one, and one of our two guests is not physically in the room with me. We actually have them dialing in from the International Space Station, which is not true, but we will hear from that guest in a moment and hear who he is and where he's from. But let me begin by first introducing my in-studio guest, Russ Katzman. Russ, who are you and why are you here?
Good morning, Ian. I'm here because you told me to be here.
Perfect.
Thank you
for listening.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. I'm here at Sykes. I've been here at Sykes for about 8 years, but I've got ton of project and change management experience. The stuff we're talking about today, I've been living for the last 20 years, and I'm just happy to be here to talk about it.
Perfect. Thanks for joining. And on the screen, not dialing in from the International Space Station, but from afar, Tim Creasy. Tim, welcome to One Take. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me here via the International Space Station in Boise, Idaho. My name is Tim Creasy. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at a company called ProSci, and we focus on how to help people be successful in change so that projects deliver expected outcomes and organizations are more successful because of it. Because in the end, it's people embracing, adopting, and using change that is the crux, the gap between a great solution and actually getting results.
Outstanding. Thank you, Russ and Tim. So a bit more personal background. So Russ, you have worked with the ProSci process. I'll ask Tim in a moment to explain more about what ProSci is about. But what led you to what you do? What was your passion? What was your inspiration to focus on change management?
Yeah, so one of the things you find about change management is that companies tend to move in that direction when they have big things going on. And at the time, back in 2014, the company I was working for had two major projects going on, and they said, "How are we going to make these things be adopted?
Okay.
How can we make sure that this stuff isn't going to be done and just sit on a shelf?" And to do so, we started going down the change management route.
Okay.
Looked for companies that had been doing it, found ProSci. I became certified as a ProSci practitioner, and it only went uphill from there.
So Tim, as a member of ProSci, as representative, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what brought you to the role you have today, and then please expand on ProSci. What is ProSci's mission, and how does it help enterprises to do these critical change initiatives?
Yeah, my role at ProSci is to really lead the research and development side of the house. We have a steep history in researching why some projects work and others don't. We were founded by an engineer, and that was the question that sparked him to really dive into better understanding change. And it come to find out that it's not whether the buttons work or if the process was drawn well. It was, did we help our people bring the change to life and how they do what they do? So over the last 2 decades, we've done research and then developed tools and training programs to help organizations build both organizational muscle at change, but also to help individuals, practitioners like Russ, but also senior leaders like you and frontline people managers to become great leaders of change wherever they sit within the organization.
Perfect. So it's hard to ignore that enterprises are being told they need to change faster and more than ever before, and who knows, how do you measure that? I mean, change is inevitable. The only constant is change. But this moniker of digital transformation now is absolutely everywhere, plastered on everything, and really is driving a lot of investigation into, frankly, what do we need to do? What is this? I've had some interesting discussions recently with some folks about how in the world of digital transformation, we seem to be fascinated and spending a lot of time on the digital and not so much time on the transformation. And so ultimately what you find is a lot of enterprises that have made predictable moves to invest in digital. Right? They're using technologies, they're subscribing to things, they're implementing tech, and then they all come back almost too predictably to sort of a state of disappointment, of stall, of uncertainty as to why that didn't work. It should have worked. It should have had such a huge impact on us. Everyone told us it would. And so the discussion that I think is not happening enough and needs to, and it's why this is such an interesting topic to explore, is the transformation component, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding what it means not just to plug in tech, but to transform the way that the humans in the organization both understand it, absorb it, apply it, feel comfortable with it. That's critical. So how have you guys seen and applied the fact that effectively we don't invest enough in change management and transformation? Is that something you're seeing or not?
Yeah, I think what you've had with project management for years, I mean, people have defined implementation as that time, scope, and budget. Are we getting it done? Is it being put in place? Are we doing it within a budget, et cetera? Right. And they forget about, are we adding that value back to the organization? Mm-hmm. If you look at the ROI, the cost benefit analysis, it's always looking at what are we going to bring back to the organization, yet we don't measure that. I mean, you and I were just talking about this yesterday. Where's the ROI in change management? Are we getting from that implementation to adding value back? And I know, Tim, that's something that we've talked about several times, is what's the scorecard look like? How do we get to that of where we're actually measuring that value coming back to the organization?
Right.
And Ian, I've been using a lot the difference between the digital revolution and digital transformation, because I think you're right. People we've become enamored by the zeros and ones of the digital revolution. But we need to expand and say, no, the transformation is the foundational shifts in how we show up as organizations, how we show up as people in society. And I think when we start to focus on that actual transformation, how we show up different, the fundamental fabric of what makes us who we are, both as organizations, as people, that's where we immediately see that human beings embracing, adopting, and using the digital revolution and all the zeros and ones that are being provided out of that, that's where we're actually going to get these meaningful shifts that are going to prepare us for the velocity of change that we're all seeing inside of our organizations.
So let's get tactical. So you're working with let's say a C-suite led investment in both a transformation and a revolution. What are the steps that ProSci does in working with enterprises? Who are the right people, the stakeholders, to be involved in the discussion? What are the steps you lead them through to make this actually happen?
All right, so I think it starts with what Russ just brought up, that it begins by defining the finish line. What is the actual market improvement we're trying to find in the organization when we bring this initiative about? And very quickly after that, we acknowledge and realize that change happens one person at a time. It is people showing up different, following new processes, using new systems, using new tools, demonstrating new mindsets, following new critical behaviors. When we realize change is individual by nature, then we can understand how to mobilize and catalyze our people to bring those changes to life. And so change management is the systemic approach to prepare, equip, and support our people to bring the changes to life we need them to in the way they show up. And that's where practitioners like Russ step in and support these large transformation teams to be thoughtful and intentional about how we help an individual understand why the change is happening, understand what's in it for them and what it means to them to get behind the change, what they need to know to do different, how to actually fulfill those new skills and behaviors, and then finally reinforcement to ensure that the change sticks once the person has brought the change to life and how they do their jobs.
So that sounds hard. It sounds like it would be a whole lot easier if I were a CEO to just declare we're going to do this and just go do it. Just deal with it. We're at a state in the industry where if we don't, then we suffer as an organization. So just get her done. How do you convince executives who would probably much rather just say get her done that they need to do the sustained, larger, more complex program?
Well, I think that the thing you mentioned earlier was you said C-suite led, right? And that's the thing that they need to understand is that the people that are doing this in their organization have to hear it from them as sponsors of the change.
Okay.
The thing that they do is they tend to say, well, we want to go make this happen, and then they go hands off. They need to understand that they have a role in making that happen,
sure.
And that if they truly want this value brought to the organization, it takes more than just stating this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and then backing off.
And I think the most important, most strategic changes that leaders are bringing into the organization need commitment beyond compliance. And senior leaders decreeing make a change will result in potentially compliance, usually malicious compliance. But if we really want to realize the true value of these transformations that are going to help us become the organization we need to be in the next 3 to 5 years, it's beyond decreeing. It's really around helping our employee base bring the change to life each day they walk through the door, because that's where we get that market improvement. And organizational landscapes are littered with examples of decreed changes where we did not get the adoption and usage we needed, right. And that project didn't deliver the ROI that was expected because we left on the table the significant portion of that return on investment that was dependent on people changing how they did their jobs.
2 things. One, I think that's absolutely true. I have seen throughout my career projects that are that litter, that did not achieve the outcomes. Second thing, after we're done, we should start a band called Malicious Compliance, because I think that right there is a winning name, and I think we've sorted it. That's what we're going to do.
Can I be the bass player?
Can you be the bass player? Sure, you can be anything you want. I do not play an instrument, so I will be the tambourine in Malicious Compliance. So
I don't play the bass, but I know how to do the bass player dance.
Oh, well, that's really all that matters. we can add the sound in afterwards. We can air guitar our way to greatness. Okay, so there's a lot of management that goes on in any sort of transformation, if you call it that. Yeah. Right. So you've got the project that needs to be managed. You've got change that needs to be managed. Are those things the same? Are they different? How does a change management initiative work with a PMO, or is it the PMO?
Yeah. The thing is, you've got project management, which, as I mentioned, time, scope, and budget.
Yeah.
And then you've got the change management, which is getting people to adopt it, getting them to understand what's in it for them, and to kind of come into the project itself. Small projects, you may be able to do both of those.
Okay.
Larger projects, you really can't handle that. You really need somebody dedicated to it. The concern is, if you are a project manager, how are you incentivized? You're incentivized to make things happen, to deliver on time, scope, and budget.
Okay.
At the end of the day, if you have a conflict between a go-live date and whether or not people are along with this, whether they're going to implement it, which are you going to default to?
You're going to go live, darn it.
So putting that on one individual kind of creates an inherent conflict.
Okay.
So that's where the smaller projects that can make that happen, it becomes tougher.
Okay.
It works in conjunction with the PMO. Yeah. Not sure that they're one and the same.
Okay.
And back in about 2004, ProSci introduced what we call the unified value proposition, that the technical side and people sides are 2 sides of the same coin. And that coin is delivering results and outcomes in times of change. And so the technical side is around designing, developing, delivering a solution that meets the needs or opportunities we have in front of us. Mm-hmm. The people side is ensuring that employees embrace, adopt, and use the change. And it's only when those 2 come together that we deliver the outcomes we need in these transformation initiatives.
Interesting. So what do you think about, Tim, you've got to be seeing this, there is, again, a heavy, pervasive narrative around the application of automation as a catalyst for change. Is that changing the way that ProSci works with its enterprise clients and customers? Is it just further sort of reinforcing the need for change management, or is it blowing the whole thing up because people are really from personal experience, I've seen just racing ahead and forgetting all of the fundamentals.
Yeah, I think it's quickening the pace at which we're seeing change, but I don't think it's changing the fundamental foundation that in the end, to deliver successful outcomes, we need to first define what it is we're trying to achieve. Second, understand who has to do their job differently and how. And then third, how are we going to prepare, equip, and support those people to bring the change into the way they show up each day? I do think that some of the fascination with the digital revolution side is causing us to sometimes neglect the fact that there are people that are really bringing these changes to life in the way that they show up. And so I think it can cause us to get lazy about driving adoption and usage of our solutions. But I don't think it at all separates out the notion that in the end, it's people showing up different that creates the value that we're trying to get out of these initiatives.
Can you save a project from itself by coming in late with change management? Because again, I've seen this enough times that we really have, because of the fascination that Tim just mentioned, we've raced ahead. Right, we have not put down the foundation stones to achieve the real change, to embed it, and there are discussions where we're putting, this automation plus humans, robots and humans together sort of thing. That is the heavy narrative. Like, you can ignore it, but if we're not focusing on the human part, we really are setting ourselves up for failure, and it's already happening en masse. So, can you save it now with change management, or do you have to start at the beginning again?
Well, certainly we'd like to start at the beginning, but a lot of times you don't think about it at that point. Sometimes you're creating pilots, sometimes you're just testing theories and just playing with stuff, and then all of a sudden you get halfway through it and you realize, well, what about the people? Somebody comes in and says, I've never seen this before. You get to testing. I've never seen this before. I'm not on board with it. Yeah. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, this was a great idea to us in a lab or in an environment where we were talking about it. We forgot about the people. Can you save a project like that? Yes. But the first thing you have to do is recognize the situation and triage it and say, what should we have done to this point? Right. What would have helped us along the way? And of course, you got to go back to the sponsor in that situation, and they have to be able to put the brakes on and say, hold on. Yeah. I know we said we were going live with this, but there's nobody that's going to help us be successful in taking this thing live.
Right. Do you pay any credence to the idea that we're trying to remove people from every component of a process we possibly can? Right, we're trying to do straight through processing, lights out manufacturing, whatever it is. We're trying to use technology to remove people from processes. Is there ever a day when we don't need to focus on change management because there's no human in the loop to change?
Yeah, I think so long as there's people who have to do their jobs differently, there's a role for change management as a discipline. And I think there's some lessons we can draw from the old BPR days in the early 90s too, where there was this fear that by overly designing our processes, we were going to eliminate human creativity and ingenuity. And I think we saw the opposite happen. When we can standardize the processes that can be standardized, we free up human capital and capacity to be focused where it's going to be the most effective. And so, if anything, I think we're going to free up the opportunity to bring human genius to where human genius has the most impact.
And I think that's your selling point. We talk about bringing people into the change. They've got to have something in it for them. They've got to have an idea of, why do I even want to partake in this? And it allows them to understand, hey, wait a minute, I can start using my brain from what my brain was meant to be used for. I can start enjoying my job. This robot's not here to replace me. It is here to help me automate what I was doing that I really didn't like doing anyway. And now I can do what I enjoy doing a little bit more.
Love it. So last question, and thank you so much, Tim and Russ, for joining me in this discussion, for sharing your experiences. I think change management is so incredibly fundamental to absolutely everything enterprises are trying to do, whether they know that or not. They need to. They need to pay attention to it. Tim, you just mentioned, you've got people, and Russ as well, you've got people you're unburdening, you're liberating to be the geniuses, to be the creatives. Does change management factor that in? How do you look at the people you've got and figure out if they're inherently the ones who can be the geniuses and creative? What do you need to do about training, about setting them up, about new incentivization to make them realize they're encouraged to do these things that might seem frankly scary or out of line with what they were hired to do initially. How's that factoring in, and is that something that you work with clients and people on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the genius is there. I think the unfortunate reality is when we drop change on people's heads with the old email on Monday for training on Tuesday for go live on Wednesday, we are actually inhibiting our people to be as successful as they are already wired to be. And so to me, change management is really around how do we prepare, equip, and support people in the journey that they're already on so that they are most successful in that journey. It's really around tapping into or uncorking the potential that our people have by treating them the way they should be treated in times of change.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it at the end of your question, and that is, are they incentivized to do so? Are they incentivized by providing value back to the organization, or are they incentivized by getting things done? Right. And that goes back to the job description. What are they hired for? What do they understand to be their position? And their position has to include bringing that value back to the organization.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to end with actually two asks of Tim. One, you had said email on Monday, that transition. When we were talking before, you had a different version of that I'd love to hear from you, and then sort of final points of what is an enterprise, what is ProSci, what do you personally suggest an owner of a change initiative, a big digital transformation, what are the first three things they should do on next Monday to kick off a major transformation?
Yeah, Ian, my running joke, and I believe human beings need context and contrast to make sense of anything.
Okay.
And so I introduced a number of years ago the email on Monday for training on Tuesday for go live on Wednesday as the opposite of how we should treat our people in times of change. And I was delivering that from stage in DC, and I had a person put her hand up. And there's 350 people in the room, and I was on point that day. So I had this room roaring, and I thought that's a pretty bold move. And so I said, "Oh, tell us your story." And she said, "We do the email on Monday for training on Tuesday for the go live that we pushed last Thursday," which is just not a sustainable way to bring change into the organization. And so as a leader of an organization, if we are leading an initiative, I think the first three things we do is, one, define the finish line. What is it we're trying to achieve? Two, be very cognizant of the fact that it is individuals moving through their own transitions that are going to cumulatively deliver the results that we're expecting. And third, as a leader, realize that you are the voice and face of change. You must be that active, visible sponsor to demonstrate to the organization that this change matters. It matters to me, and I will be here to support you through the journey that we're asking you to make, because change is hard and we know it, but this change matters, and we're here to treat you the right way in this change journey that we're about to set you out on.
Spectacular. Thank you so much, Tim, Russ, for joining me on One Take, for experimenting with the calling in from the space station. I think this is such a critical and interesting topic. We'll put links in the video podcast to some of the resources and some of the writings that Tim's done on this topic, and hope everyone found this interesting. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.